She grew up in a small town, where life moved slowly and dreams often felt too big for the streets and houses around her. From the moment she could remember, she was drawn to sound. She loved the way a gentle breeze could make the wind chimes sing outside her window, or how birds would call to each other early in the morning. But nothing captivated her more than the piano. Her fascination began when she stumbled upon an old, upright piano in the corner of a dusty living room in her house. Its wood was scratched and worn, the keys slightly yellowed with age, and yet it seemed magical to her. Her family was not wealthy. Money was tight, and luxuries like piano lessons were something they could never afford. She watched other children in town take lessons and perform in recitals, feeling a mix of awe and envy. Still, she didn't let that stop her. Every day, after finishing her chores and homework, she would sit at the piano and try to make it sing. Her fingers stumbled and faltered at first, often missing keys or pressing the wrong ones. The sound that came out was far from music, more like a clumsy noise. But she did not give up. She listened carefully, repeated patterns, and practiced for hours. Slowly, very slowly, the notes began to form melodies that sounded like something she had imagined. People in her town were skeptical. Friends and neighbors would smile politely when they saw her sitting at the piano, but some would make jokes. "Why do you waste your time?" they would say. "You'll never become a pianist." The words stung, but she learned to ignore them. Deep down, she believed there was something more waiting for her in music. It was not about fame or money. It was about feeling alive, about expressing something she could not say in words. Her parents did their best to support her, even if they could not provide lessons. Her mother would hum along with her as she practiced, and her father would repair broken keys or polish the old piano to make it sound better. They were proud of her dedication, even when others laughed. But the girl often felt lonely in her pursuit. There were no friends who shared her passion, no teachers to guide her, and no one who truly understood how much the piano meant to her. Despite the challenges, she found inspiration everywhere. She would listen to old recordings of famous pianists on the radio or on borrowed CDs. She tried to imitate the touch, the emotion, and the timing. She spent nights lying awake, imagining herself on grand stages, the audience silent and mesmerized by her music. In her mind, she could see the lights, the applause, the way the piano would come alive under her fingers. It was a dream that seemed impossible, but it was hers. At school, she was known as quiet and reserved, someone who kept to herself. She had classmates who were popular and confident, but she preferred the company of her music. Sometimes, she would play small tunes during breaks or lunch hours, and a few classmates would stop to listen. They would clap politely, but soon they would leave, uninterested or impatient. Still, those moments of attention, brief as they were, gave her encouragement. She realized that music had a way of reaching people, even when words could not. One afternoon, she found an old music book at the town's second-hand store. Its pages were yellowed, and the notes seemed almost impossible for her to read, but she bought it anyway. She spent weeks deciphering the compositions, practicing each piece slowly, learning to feel the rhythm, the emotion, and the story behind the notes. Every small victory, like playing a short melody without mistakes, felt monumental. She began to see herself not just as a child trying to play the piano, but as someone capable of creating beauty through it. Her dedication started to draw the attention of a few supportive neighbors and friends. They would stop by to listen, offering encouragement. "You have something special," they said, but there were still many who laughed or doubted her abilities. They thought she was chasing a dream too big for a small-town girl. Yet she never wavered. She practiced in the early mornings, in the evenings, and sometimes even late at night, careful not to disturb anyone. Her piano became her closest friend, her companion through loneliness, and the place where she could express everything she felt. There were times when she felt discouraged. Sometimes, she would hear her music and think it sounded empty or weak. She would compare herself to the recordings she loved so much and feel frustrated. But each time she considered giving up, she reminded herself why she had started. Music was not just about skill, it was about heart, about connection. She believed that if she poured herself into it, if she persisted, people would one day see what she could do. One day, her father found an old letter tucked away in a drawer, written by someone who claimed to have been close to her family. The letter mentioned a remarkable pianist who had a child, and though the details were vague, something clicked in her mind. Could it be possible that her love for the piano was more than just a coincidence? Could she really have a connection to someone who had mastered the very instrument she adored? The thought was thrilling but also confusing. She didn't know how to prove it, and she didn't dare speak about it yet. But the idea lingered, giving her a new sense of purpose and curiosity. With this spark of possibility, her practice became more focused. She tried to mimic not only the style of the pianists she admired but also the intensity, the soul behind their music. She would play slowly at first, breaking down each note, each chord, until she could feel the emotion behind it. She began to notice subtle changes in her own playing, moments when the music seemed to flow naturally, almost as if it were a part of her. It was exhilarating, and it kept her going through days when she felt tired or doubted herself. Her life continued in a rhythm of hard work and quiet hope. She helped her family at home, studied diligently at school, and practiced whenever she could. She learned to appreciate small achievements, like mastering a difficult piece or performing a short melody flawlessly. Each step forward reinforced her belief that she could achieve something remarkable. She imagined a day when she would play in front of a real audience, when people would listen not out of courtesy, but because they were captivated. Neighbors and strangers occasionally commented on her dedication. Some were supportive, others skeptical. "You'll never make it," they would say. "It's too much for a small-town girl." But the girl began to understand that their laughter and doubt were not barriers. They were challenges to be overcome. She learned to smile politely, keep her head down, and continue practicing, letting her music speak for itself. She realized that her journey was hers alone, and the opinions of others could not define her. By the time she reached her early teens, her skills had grown remarkably. She could play complex compositions with a surprising degree of confidence. Her fingers moved with agility and precision, and her understanding of rhythm and emotion deepened. Even though she had no formal teacher, she had developed her own techniques and style, drawing inspiration from recordings, observation, and her own imagination. Her passion had become a force that carried her forward, shaping her identity and giving her a sense of purpose that nothing else could match. Through it all, she never lost the joy of music. Every note, every chord, every melody she played reminded her of why she started. Music was not just a skill or a hobby. It was a way to communicate, a way to feel, and a way to dream. And though the world around her sometimes laughed or doubted, she felt certain that one day, her love for the piano would take her somewhere extraordinary. She could not yet imagine how far it would go, but she was ready to find out. The small town had nurtured her beginnings, and the piano had nurtured her soul. Together, they would guide her toward a destiny she had only just begun to glimpse. As she grew older, the secret about her family began to weigh heavily on her mind. The letter her father had found hinted at a connection she had never imagined, and now she could not stop thinking about it. She began asking questions carefully, not wanting to seem foolish or overexcited. Her mother seemed hesitant, looking away when she was asked about the letter. Her father, too, avoided the subject, offering only vague answers. But the curiosity in her heart could not be quieted. She felt a deep, growing need to understand who she really was and why music seemed to flow naturally through her veins. She spent hours in the library, researching famous pianists from decades past. She compared photos, read interviews, and listened to countless recordings, trying to see if any of them could be her father. Every name seemed distant and untouchable, yet there was something about the music of one particular pianist that made her heart ache with recognition. The way the notes danced and the intensity of the expression reminded her of the feelings she had while playing. It was as if a part of her had known this music before she ever touched a piano. At home, her practice took on a new intensity. She would sit at the piano late into the night, her fingers flying over the keys with a sense of urgency she had never felt before. Every composition she played, she tried to imagine herself in the shoes of the pianist from the recordings. She studied the emotions, the pauses, the energy in every piece. It became an obsession, not in a negative sense, but in a way that drove her to improve and understand. She wanted to feel that connection fully, to know if the stories of her father could be true. The town remained largely unaware of her inner struggle. To the neighbors and classmates, she was still the quiet, diligent girl who loved the piano. Some noticed that her skills were improving dramatically. Her music began to carry more emotion, and even casual listeners could sense a depth that was unusual for someone her age. But most people still dismissed her, thinking she was simply talented in a small, unremarkable way. They had no idea that behind every melody was a girl searching for her own history and trying to find a link to a man whose name carried respect and awe. Her parents continued to support her quietly. They could see that music had become her life, and they did not interfere. Her mother would bring her tea while she practiced late at night, and her father would repair the piano whenever it made strange sounds. They never said much, but their small gestures were a reminder that she was not alone, even if she had to discover her heritage by herself. It was a delicate balance of secrecy and support that shaped her days. She started experimenting with improvisation. Instead of just playing the written notes, she began to add her own touches, letting her emotions guide the melodies. It was during these moments that she felt the closest to the idea of her father. The music seemed to flow effortlessly, as if she were speaking a language she had inherited. For hours, she could lose herself completely, and the world outside the walls of her small room faded away. In those moments, she felt alive in a way that nothing else could give her. Despite her growing talent, doubt crept in at times. She wondered if she was imagining the connection, if she had built a fantasy around a letter that might have been mistaken or exaggerated. She questioned whether she could ever truly measure up to a pianist who had captivated the world, someone whose name inspired awe. But every time she played, she felt the truth of her own ability. The music spoke to her in ways that words could not. It reminded her that talent was not only inherited but also nurtured by passion and perseverance. One day, she found an old photograph tucked into the music book she had bought years ago. It was faded and almost forgotten, showing a man at a piano with a serious yet gentle expression. Something in the way he held his hands, the way he focused on the keys, resonated deeply with her. Her heart raced as she traced the outline of the hands with her eyes. Could this be her father? She felt a mixture of hope and fear. The idea of finally discovering the truth was thrilling, but she was also afraid that it might shatter the dream she had built in her mind. Her curiosity led her to reach out to distant relatives she had never met. She wrote letters, carefully explaining her interest in music and her suspicion about her heritage. Most letters went unanswered, but a few replies arrived, vague but encouraging. One elderly relative confirmed that there had been a remarkable pianist in the family whose child had remained largely unknown. That confirmation ignited a fire in her heart. She now had more than a hint. She had proof that she might truly be connected to a musical genius. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. School life continued alongside her musical journey. While her peers focused on typical teenage concerns, she lived in two worlds: the ordinary life of classes and friends, and the extraordinary world of music and discovery. Her classmates still underestimated her, laughing at her intense dedication, calling it obsessive. She ignored them, knowing that her journey was unlike anyone else's. She found solace in moments of quiet reflection, playing the piano in empty classrooms or in the corner of the music room, letting the notes carry her away from the noise of teenage judgment. As her skills developed, she began performing small pieces for friends and family. The reactions were always mixed. Some were amazed by her ability, while others, perhaps not fully understanding, dismissed it as luck or childish talent. She learned not to rely on their validation, realizing that her motivation must come from within. Each performance, each melody, was a step toward understanding herself and her possible connection to her father. She was determined to prove, first to herself, that she belonged in the world of music. Her daily routine became disciplined. She would wake early, practice for hours, attend school, and return home to continue her study of music and her family history. The balance was difficult, and there were times when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. Yet she pushed forward, knowing that the pursuit of her dream was worth every moment of effort. She started keeping a journal of her progress, noting improvements, mistakes, and moments of inspiration. The journal became a companion, a record of her journey, and a tool to help her grow. In her quiet moments, she imagined meeting her father, if indeed he was the man she suspected. She wondered what he would think of her playing, whether he would recognize the talent in her hands, or feel a connection she had longed to find. These thoughts filled her with both hope and anxiety. She could not yet reach him, could not yet prove herself to the world, but she practiced as if that day would come, preparing to show him the music that flowed through her. Occasionally, she faced setbacks. Notes that should have been easy would stumble. Compositions that she had mastered would suddenly seem confusing. But she learned patience. She discovered that mistakes were not failures but opportunities to learn, and that persistence was as important as talent. Slowly, her confidence grew. She could see her progress, feel the changes in her own playing, and hear the subtle differences that made her music more expressive and alive. As weeks turned into months, she began to realize that music was no longer just a hobby. It had become her language, her identity. She could express emotions that words could not capture, connect with others in ways that went beyond conversation. Even those who doubted her talent or laughed at her efforts could feel the impact of her playing. Music had become her voice, her way of claiming space in a world that often ignored or underestimated her. Her connection to her father, real or imagined, became a source of inspiration. She felt that she carried a legacy, a gift that she must honor and develop. Every note she played was a tribute to the possibility of that connection, and every composition she mastered strengthened her resolve. She knew that discovering the truth about her family would not come easily, but the journey itself was shaping her into someone resilient, passionate, and remarkable. By the end of this period in her life, she had transformed from a quiet, determined girl into a young musician with a sense of purpose and direction. She had faced doubt, loneliness, and the limits of her small town, but she had also discovered strength, talent, and a connection to something greater than herself. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a bridge to her past, a key to her potential, and a guide toward the future she had only begun to imagine. The journey ahead was uncertain, but she was ready to continue, driven by curiosity, determination, and the music that flowed in her heart. The day finally came when she decided to perform in front of a larger audience, something she had never done beyond the comfort of friends and family. The local community center was hosting a small music recital, mostly for children to show their progress. She knew it was not a grand stage, but it was a step forward, an opportunity to test her skills and measure herself against others. The thought of being judged, laughed at, or dismissed made her stomach twist with nerves, but the excitement of sharing her music outweighed the fear. As she arrived at the community center, she noticed other children practicing and warming up. Some were confident, chatting easily with their parents, while others were tense, fingers tapping on their instruments. She quietly found a corner and went over her mental notes, recalling every detail she had practiced for weeks. Her fingers trembled slightly as she imagined the moment she would step onto the small stage. She took a deep breath and reminded herself why she was there. She was not just playing for applause. She was playing for herself, for her passion, and for the chance to prove her dedication. When her turn came, she walked up to the piano and adjusted the bench. The stage lights were simple, but to her, they seemed brighter than the sun. She sat down, closed her eyes for a brief moment, and let the silence settle around her. Then she placed her fingers on the keys and began. At first, the notes were cautious, deliberate, as if testing the waters. But as the music flowed, she felt herself slip into a rhythm that was almost effortless. Her hands moved with precision, her expression absorbed in the emotion she was conveying, and the room began to fall silent. People who had been chatting or fidgeting stopped to listen. The first piece she played was delicate and gentle, with soft notes rising and falling like waves. She could feel the audience leaning in, even if just slightly, drawn by the music. The second piece was more complex, a mixture of fast runs and careful pauses. She had memorized every note, but more importantly, she felt the story behind each chord. She imagined herself telling a tale without words, and the audience responded not with laughter or skepticism, but with quiet attention. For the first time, she felt the possibility that her music could truly reach others. After she finished, there was a pause, a moment of stillness, and then a few people clapped. It was polite, hesitant applause, but it was enough to fill her with a sense of accomplishment. She realized that she had faced the fear of performing and had not faltered. The relief was enormous, and a smile crept onto her face despite the nerves that lingered. She stepped down from the stage, feeling lighter than she had in months, as if the music had lifted a weight from her shoulders. Some parents and local teachers approached her afterward. They offered compliments, encouragement, and even advice on how to continue improving. It was a mix of emotions for her, gratitude for the recognition, but also a new awareness of how far she still had to go. The doubt from her peers and others in the town had not disappeared entirely, but the taste of acknowledgement, however small, strengthened her resolve. She understood that success was not always about overwhelming applause, but about the quiet victories that showed progress and growth. In the days that followed, word of her performance began to spread. A few neighbors mentioned it casually, and her parents were proud beyond words. Even though the recognition was small and local, it meant more to her than any distant praise could. She felt that she had taken a significant step on her journey, proving to herself that her music could touch others. The experience also gave her a glimpse of what larger stages might feel like, igniting a dream of performing beyond her small town. Encouraged by this first public performance, she began preparing for more. She sought out opportunities to play at school events, local gatherings, and any place where a piano was available. Each performance, no matter how small, was a chance to practice, to learn, and to connect with an audience. She noticed that with each performance, she became more confident. Her hands moved more freely, her expression more relaxed, and her emotions more clearly conveyed. It was as if each note she played carried a piece of her heart to those listening. Despite her progress, skepticism still existed. Some peers whispered that her success was overhyped or that she was lucky. At times, their comments stung, reminding her that the journey to recognition would not be easy. But she had learned to focus on what mattered most, her music and her own growth. She knew that true validation would come not from casual observers, but from her own understanding of her abilities and from those who could appreciate the depth and skill she brought to every performance. Her exploration of her family history continued alongside her growing experience as a performer. She discovered more about her father, reading stories of his talent, dedication, and the impact he had on music. The idea that she might be connected to such a legacy added both pressure and inspiration. She began studying his compositions more seriously, analyzing the structure, the flow, and the emotional depth of each piece. It was challenging, sometimes overwhelming, but she felt an unspoken connection with the man she had yet to meet. Each composition she learned was a bridge between the past and her own journey. Friends and teachers noticed the change in her as well. She had grown more focused, disciplined, and confident. She spoke less, listened more, and expressed herself through her music rather than words. People who had doubted her or dismissed her talent began to pay attention, intrigued by the determination and skill she displayed. She realized that proving oneself was not about showing off, but about consistently working toward mastery and letting results speak for themselves. She also faced moments of self-doubt, especially when tackling her father's compositions. Some pieces were extremely difficult, demanding not just technical skill but emotional understanding that went beyond her years. There were nights when frustration threatened to overwhelm her. Notes that had sounded easy suddenly became confusing, and entire sections of music seemed impossible. Yet she refused to give up. She broke the pieces down, studied recordings, and practiced tirelessly until she could finally play them with confidence. The The satisfaction of overcoming these challenges was immense, teaching her resilience and patience. One afternoon, she received an unexpected opportunity. A teacher from a nearby city had heard of her growing talent and offered to provide guidance. Though informal and brief, these lessons introduced her to new techniques and approaches. She learned about expression, dynamics, and the subtle ways in which emotion could be conveyed through music. It was a revelation, showing her that there was still much to learn, but also giving her tools to improve and refine her already impressive skill. The community began to take notice in a quiet way. Neighbors who once laughed at her dedication now expressed curiosity and interest. People who had ignored her talent started asking when she would perform next. The skepticism had not entirely disappeared, but it was being replaced by a cautious respect. For her, this was not the ultimate goal, but it was an encouraging sign that perseverance could slowly change opinions. She felt that the small steps she had taken were leading her toward something greater. She also continued to nurture her personal connection to music, finding inspiration in nature, in books, and in the stories of her family. Each experience, each observation influenced the way she played. She discovered that music was not just a series of notes, but a way of understanding the world, a method of expressing what could not be spoken. It became a lens through which she viewed life, shaping her perception, and giving her confidence in her own identity. As her performances grew more frequent, she began to imagine herself on even larger stages. The thought of playing in front of a vast audience was both thrilling and intimidating. She practiced with the idea that one day, she might not only prove her talent to herself but also show the world what she could do. The connection to her father's legacy fueled this vision, giving her a sense of purpose beyond her small town. She wanted to honor that legacy, while also carving her own path and creating her own identity as a musician. With each step forward, she became more aware of the power of persistence. She had faced ridicule, doubt, and uncertainty, but her dedication and love for music had carried her through. She learned to value the small victories, the perfect performance of a difficult section, the recognition of a mentor, or the quiet admiration of a listener. These moments, though modest, were the foundation of her growth and the proof that she was on the right path. By the end of this stage of her journey, she had transformed significantly. The timid, uncertain girl who had once struggled to play simple melodies had become a young musician with confidence, skill, and a sense of purpose. She had faced her first real challenges in public performance, experienced the mixture of doubt and encouragement from others, and deepened her connection to the music she loved. Her journey was far from over, but she now understood that each note she played was a step closer to her dreams, a step toward uncovering the truth about herself, and a step toward a future shaped by her talent and perseverance. Her growing recognition brought a new set of challenges. The whispers of doubt and disbelief had turned into questions and occasional scrutiny. People were starting to wonder if she really had a connection to the famous pianist her parents had hinted at. Some critics in the town were skeptical, questioning whether her talent was genuine or simply the result of practice. It was a strange mixture of admiration and suspicion that she had never experienced before, and it made her cautious but also more determined. She began preparing for larger opportunities, even though the thought of performing for a critical audience made her nervous. She worked on her technique, her expression, and her confidence, all while balancing school and family responsibilities. Every day brought new challenges, and she learned to manage her time carefully. She practiced early in the morning, after school, and late into the night, always seeking to improve and to be ready for any chance that might come her way. One day, a local music teacher approached her parents with an unusual request. He had heard of her performances and wanted to hear her play in person. He was a respected figure in the music community, known for recognizing real talent. Her parents were proud and nervous at the same time, but they agreed. She was invited to perform at his studio, a small, quiet place filled with the sound of pianos and other instruments. The air smelled faintly of wood and polish, a comforting environment for someone who loved music as much as she did. She arrived at the studio, her heart pounding with excitement and fear. The teacher greeted her warmly, but with a professional air, asking her to play something she had been working on. She sat at the piano, closed her eyes for a moment, and let the music flow. She began with a piece she had been perfecting for weeks, and as the notes filled the room, she could feel the intensity of his attention. He listened carefully, nodding slightly, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he was silent for a moment, and then he smiled. "You have remarkable talent," he said. "Not many young musicians play with this level of understanding and emotion. Have you considered formal study?" She felt a rush of excitement and anxiety. Formal study was something she had dreamed of, but it seemed so far away, almost impossible for someone from a small town with limited resources. Still, the thought that someone of his experience recognized her ability made her heart swell. She nodded, eager to learn and to continue growing. As word of her talent spread, the scrutiny increased. People who had once ignored her performances now watched closely, looking for flaws or signs that she might not live up to her potential. Some articles in local newspapers discussed her as a curiosity, a young girl who might be related to a famous pianist. Critics questioned whether she could truly match the skill and emotional depth of the musician she was rumored to be connected to. While some comments were discouraging, she learned to filter out negativity and focus on her own progress. Her connection to her father, or at least the idea of it, became a central part of her motivation. She studied his compositions in depth, learning the nuances, the dynamics, and the emotional storytelling that made his music extraordinary. Some pieces were incredibly difficult, demanding not just technical skill but a deep understanding of emotion. There were times when she felt overwhelmed, doubting whether she could ever do justice to the legacy she hoped to honor. But each challenge she overcame strengthened her confidence and her dedication. At school, her peers began to notice her growing skill and reputation. Some were supportive, showing interest in her performances, while others remained skeptical or dismissive. She learned not to seek approval from everyone but to value the encouragement from those who genuinely understood her passion. She continued performing at school events, small concerts, and community gatherings, refining her technique and building her presence. Each performance was a step toward proving herself not only to others but also to the part of her that longed for connection with her heritage. Her parents were proud but careful to guide her without pressure. They saw the potential for both success and disappointment and wanted to protect her from unnecessary stress. They encouraged her to focus on her music, on learning and growing, rather than chasing fame or recognition. Their support gave her a sense of stability, allowing her to navigate the challenges of growing public attention without losing herself or her love for music. One evening, after a particularly long practice session, she reflected on her journey so far. She had faced doubt, ridicule, and the limitations of her small town. She had struggled with uncertainty about her heritage and her connection to a musical legacy. Yet she had persevered, learning not just about music but about herself. Her talent was real, but so was her determination, and together they had carried her through difficult moments. She realized that every challenge had made her stronger, and every small success had prepared her for greater opportunities. Soon, an opportunity arose to perform at a regional music competition. This was a bigger stage with more skilled participants and critical listeners. The thought was intimidating, but she knew it was a chance to measure herself against a broader field and to demonstrate the depth of her talent. She practiced rigorously, focusing not just on playing the notes correctly, but on conveying emotion, telling a story through music, and maintaining her presence under pressure. When the day of the competition arrived, she was both nervous and excited. The auditorium was filled with musicians, teachers, and audience members. The lights were brighter, the stage larger, and the expectations higher. She took a deep breath, remembering all the hours of practice, the small victories, and the moments of quiet determination that had brought her here. As she began to play, the nerves faded, replaced by the flow of music that she had cultivated over years of dedication. Her fingers moved with precision and feeling, each note carrying the story she wanted to tell. The audience was silent, absorbed in the music. For the first time, she felt the power of her playing to captivate a room full of strangers. The complexity of the pieces did not overwhelm her. Instead, it became a canvas for expression, a way to connect with people she had never met. When she finished, there was a moment of stillness, followed by applause. It was more enthusiastic and genuine than any she had received before. The recognition felt validating not just because of praise, but because she had faced the challenge and performed with authenticity. Critics and judges offered feedback, some technical, some emotional. They praised her understanding of the music, her technique, and her ability to convey feeling. Some asked about her background and her potential connection to the famous pianist, showing that her growing reputation had reached beyond local circles. She answered carefully, acknowledging her interest in the legacy while focusing on her own journey and efforts. The experience was empowering, demonstrating that dedication and skill could transcend doubt and speculation. Returning home, she reflected on how far she had come. The small town, once a place where her dreams seemed impossible, had been the foundation of her growth. The piano, once a mysterious and magical object in a dusty room, had become the central thread of her life, connecting her to potential heritage, personal identity, and future possibilities. She realized that every challenge, every moment of doubt, and every triumph had shaped her into a musician capable of both skill and emotion. Her journey was far from over. She knew that larger stages, more critical audiences, and more complex challenges awaited her. Yet she also knew that she had built the foundation for resilience, confidence, and artistry. The experiences of ridicule, doubt, and initial skepticism had taught her perseverance and focus. The moments of encouragement and recognition had fueled her motivation and belief in herself. And the connection to a musical legacy, real or imagined, had inspired her to aim higher and strive for excellence. She continued to practice daily, study her father's compositions, and seek opportunities to perform. She understood that talent alone was not enough. Consistent effort, learning, and the courage to face public scrutiny were equally important. Each step forward reinforced her dedication, and each performance, no matter how small, became a milestone in her journey. She began to see herself not just as a girl with potential, but as a musician capable of creating meaningful experiences for others through her art. By the end of this phase, she had transformed significantly. From a young girl practicing alone in a dusty room, she had grown into a confident performer, recognized for both her skill and her emotional expression. The whispers of doubt had not vanished completely, but she had learned to rise above them. She had faced public scrutiny, rigorous challenges, and personal uncertainty, and she had emerged stronger, more capable, and more determined than ever. The journey ahead remained full of questions and possibilities, but she now had the experience, skill, and resilience to face it with confidence and passion. She had come a long way since the days of practicing alone in her small room, unsure if anyone would ever hear her music. By now, her talent was widely recognized, but more importantly, she had discovered the strength and determination within herself. The journey had been difficult, filled with doubt, ridicule, and moments of uncertainty. Yet each challenge had shaped her, and she was ready to take the next step in her musical journey. An opportunity arrived when a regional music festival announced auditions for young talents to perform on a bigger stage. It was a chance to showcase her abilities in front of a much larger audience and respected judges. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. She knew the competition would be fierce, with many skilled musicians vying for recognition. But she also felt ready. She had spent years refining her technique, understanding emotion in music, and developing her own unique style. This was her moment to prove herself, not only to others but to herself. The days leading up to the festival were filled with intense preparation. She practiced for hours each day, focusing on every detail of her pieces, from the smallest nuances to the overall flow of the music. She studied her father's compositions meticulously, analyzing the subtleties and emotion behind each note. She also experimented with her own improvisations, allowing her personality and feelings to shine through. The piano had become an extension of herself, a way to communicate what words could not. As the day of the audition arrived, nerves mixed with excitement coursed through her. The festival hall was grand, far larger than any stage she had performed on before. The lights, the sound system, and the crowd all added to the intensity of the moment. She could hear other participants warming up, some confident, some tense, and it reminded her of her first performance years ago in the small community center. The memories of those early days made her feel humble but also proud of how far she had come. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage and took a deep breath. She sat at the piano and allowed herself a brief moment of stillness, feeling the weight of the audience's gaze but not letting it control her. Then she began to play. The music flowed from her hands with a sense of freedom and mastery she had never experienced before. Each note, each chord, carried her emotions and told a story of perseverance, hope, and passion. The audience was silent, absorbed in the music, and she felt a connection with every listener in the room. Her performance was intense and moving. She played with precision, emotion, and an understanding that went beyond technique. It was as if she were speaking directly to the audience through the language of the piano. When she finished, there was a moment of quiet, followed by enthusiastic applause. The judges were visibly impressed, noting both her technical skill and the depth of feeling she conveyed. For her, the applause was not just recognition of her ability, but affirmation that her journey, her struggles, and her dedication had all been worth it. After the festival, news of her talent began to spread beyond her town. Local newspapers wrote about her, mentioning the possibility that she might be connected to the famous pianist whose legacy she had studied so closely. The speculation added a new layer of attention, but she focused on what mattered most. Continuing to improve, creating music that touched people, and honoring the passion that had driven her from the beginning. She learned to navigate this attention with grace, understanding that recognition was a byproduct of her dedication, not the goal itself. Her connection to her father became clearer over time. She discovered letters, recordings, and anecdotes that confirmed the family link she had long suspected. It was an emotional revelation, connecting her to a past she had imagined, but could now understand more fully. She realized that her love for music was not only her own but also a continuation of a legacy. This knowledge deepened her appreciation for her talent and strengthened her determination to honor her heritage while forging her own path. With growing recognition, she also faced new challenges. People who had once doubted her were now curious, and some still questioned whether she could live up to expectations. There were pressures to perform perfectly, to match the reputation of her father, and to prove that her talent was genuine. She learned to balance these external pressures with her own sense of purpose, reminding herself that the true measure of her success was not in comparison to others, but in the depth of her dedication and the quality of her music. She continued to perform at regional events, competitions, and community gatherings, always striving to improve. Each performance brought new lessons, teaching her about stage presence, audience connection, and emotional expression. She learned to listen carefully, to feel the room, and to let her music resonate naturally. The experiences reinforced her understanding that music was not just about skill, but about the ability to communicate and connect with others. Her practice routine became more disciplined and sophisticated. She studied theory, explored complex compositions, and experimented with different styles. She also worked on her improvisation, allowing her personality to shine through in unexpected ways. Through these efforts, she developed a unique voice as a pianist, blending technical mastery with emotional storytelling. Her talent was now unmistakable, not just inherited or learned, but truly hers. Alongside her growth as a musician, she also nurtured her personal life and relationships. She spent time with supportive friends and family who encouraged her without judgment. She found moments of joy in everyday life, drawing inspiration from experiences, nature, and the world around her. These moments of reflection enriched her music, allowing her to play with authenticity and feeling. She understood that a musician's depth was not only in technique but in life experience and emotional awareness. One day, she received an invitation to perform in a prestigious concert hall in a nearby city. It was an opportunity she had dreamed of for years, a chance to perform on a stage where her father had once played. The thought was overwhelming, but she embraced it with determination and excitement. She knew that this performance could mark a turning point in her career, providing a platform to demonstrate her talent to a broader audience and to honor the legacy she had come to understand so deeply. The day of the concert arrived, and she prepared meticulously. She practiced tirelessly, rehearsed her pieces, and visualized the performance. When she stepped onto the grand stage, the atmosphere was electric. The audience included experienced musicians, critics, and music lovers, all attentive and expectant. She felt a mixture of nerves and exhilaration, but as she sat at the piano and began to play, the world around her disappeared. The music became her voice, her expression, and her connection to the audience. Her performance was extraordinary. Each piece flowed seamlessly, with emotion and technical mastery intertwined. The audience was captivated, responding with genuine enthusiasm and appreciation. Critics praised her skill, emotional depth, and unique style. For her, the moment was the culmination of years of dedication, struggle, and passion. She had not only proved her talent but also honored the musical legacy of her family, demonstrating that her abilities were a combination of inherited skill, relentless practice, and personal expression. After the concert, she reflected on her journey. She had faced doubt, ridicule, and obstacles, but each challenge had strengthened her resolve. She had discovered the truth about her heritage, embraced her passion, and developed her talent into something remarkable. Her journey was a testament to perseverance, dedication, and the power of believing in oneself. She understood that success was not just measured by applause or recognition, but by the growth, resilience, and authenticity she had cultivated along the way. As she looked to the future, she knew that her journey as a musician was only beginning. There would be new challenges, larger stages, and greater opportunities to explore. But she felt ready, confident in her abilities, and inspired by the knowledge that she could overcome obstacles through passion and perseverance. Her connection to her father's legacy was now a source of strength, guiding her as she continued to develop her own voice and share her music with the world. Her story became an inspiration to others, especially young musicians who faced doubt or discouragement. She showed that talent alone was not enough. It required hard work, resilience, and belief in oneself. She demonstrated that obstacles could be overcome, that dreams could be pursued even in the face of skepticism, and that a connection to one's past could serve as both motivation and guidance. Her journey was proof that dedication, passion, and courage could transform a simple love for music into something extraordinary. By the end of this chapter in her life, she had emerged as a confident, skilled, and emotionally expressive pianist. She had conquered the doubts of others, navigated the pressures of growing recognition, and embraced the legacy she had long sought to understand. Her talent was undeniable, her journey inspiring, and her future full of promise. The music she played was more than notes on a page. It was a reflection of her heart, her perseverance, and her unwavering commitment to her passion. She had proved that dreams, no matter how improbable they seemed, could be achieved through dedication, resilience, and a belief in oneself.